Greetings, citizens. Hey there, you beautiful, creepy human being, you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day-to-day, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the murder of 18-year-old Sarah Ludemann. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes more than one a week. And I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. So before we get into the video, I need to say a quick thank you to today's sponsor, which is Skillshare. And if you already know, if you've been here, you know, I love Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform where lifelong learners can go to learn skills that will benefit them for a lifetime. And I've been really loving on Skillshare about the last year or so. Me and Skillshare have been in a pretty committed relationship because their classes really do benefit my life and they benefit this channel, which I don't know if you know this. You may know this, you may not know this, but this channel in the last about year has become my job. Weird to say out loud, but yeah, this is my job. I totally changed career paths after spending almost 10 years, almost a whole decade as a paralegal. And I feel like in the current pace of the world we live in, you kind of have to be able to teach yourself new skills if you want to do that. And there's so many different types of jobs now that you can teach yourself to do. And Skillshare has been really helpful for me in that way. I've been able to fine-tune skills that I already had while learning new skills altogether that have been very beneficial in helping me in this current chapter of my life. So if you're anything like me, you will love Skillshare because it's an online learning community that offers thousands of classes to a community of members across 150 countries, and they offer classes in a variety of subjects, from classes on things like social media success, productivity and time management, or what I'm personally the most invested in. Okay, listen. I've been really interested recently in classes on podcasting, and I've been able to find a multitude of classes on Skillshare in that particular category. And really, you can find classes on anything that interests you, anything that you want to learn. So I've recently started taking a class called Podcasting 101, How to Start a Podcast. And that class is taught by Donald Fitzgill Jr. And I've been really enjoying it because it teaches you how to start a podcast. You know, it's in the name. And it's an idea I've sort of been toying with. So I thought maybe I'd learn how to start a podcast, see what goes into it, see what all it entails, see how to do it properly, and see if it's like a good fit for me. It's one of those things that I've been toying with adding to my already very, very busy schedule. And speaking of my busy schedule, that's part of what makes Skillshare particularly beneficial to me is you can do it at your own pace. They have a multitude of different classes on so many different subjects, but you don't have to take them at a specific time. You can fit it in whenever you have a free moment. And that's something that I find to be very, very important. And I feel like just in general, we need to learn how to treat ourselves, even if whatever that looks like for you. And for me, that is taking the time to teach myself something, taking the time to fill my cup, right? Because you can't pour from an empty cup. And I have a lot of people in my life that I need to, take care of and be the best version of myself for. And in order to do that well, I need to have self-care. And self-care for me is, and has always been really, learning. So, great news. Skillshare is offering the first 1,000 members of the Brat Pack who click the link in my description box to get 1 month free to peruse, to browse, to take all the classes that Skillshare has to offer. So if you're like me and you're a rad lifelong learner who wants to learn some new skills that will benefit them for a lifetime, make sure to click the link at the top of the description box, and the first 1,000 members of the Brat Pack to do so will get 1 month free to peruse all the classes that Skillshare has to offer today. And I just want to say one more thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video and making it possible for me to put out content as consistently as I do. And I want to thank you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. All right, now that I'm done spreading the good word of Skillshare, we can go ahead and get into this video. Now, this video is on a case that has been requested for me to do a number of times by one particular longtime subscriber, and that is Joe Michael, the boy wonder. He has been patiently waiting for me to tell this story. He has asked a number of times, and today is the day. This is a case that I was mildly familiar with, like I had heard about it on some podcast years ago. And now that I've really looked into it myself, because I had not done that yet, it's like, wow, it's just like a very sad case. It seems like it was a very avoidable situation. And it also, I feel like this case is controversial. And I feel like we will have some differing opinions in the comments where generally speaking, we kind of all agree the same thing. This killer is a dick. And this is why. I feel like this is one of those cases where some people will feel that way and some people will feel like maybe it was just an accident, like it wasn't supposed to happen. So I'm very curious to see what everybody has to say after you hear all of the details, because I feel like this is a case that does have a lot of gray area. So today I'm going to tell you the entire story. I read all of the things so you do not have to. And at the end of the story, after I've given you all the details, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can kind of have it kicking around in your brain as we go through this entire case. But the question of the day is this: do you believe that the sentence that Sarah's murderer was given, do you believe that it was justice? After you hear all the details, I would love to hear all your thoughts in the comments below. With all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of 18-year-old Sarah Ludemann. Now, I want to start this video off with a quote. This is a quote from the judge who later presided over Sarah's murderer's trial. The judge said of this murder, and I quote, "This murder was no accident. It took a lot of force to plunge that knife through skin, through fat and bone, through someone's heart." So today we're actually going to be talking about two teenage girls. We're going to be talking about 18-year-old Sarah Ludemann, and we're going to be talking about her killer, which was a 19-year-old girl named Rachel Wade. Now, Sarah and Rachel did not like each other. They got about as close to hating each other as two people could get. They spent a ton of their emotional energy berating each other, harassing each other, but this was mostly done from a distance through cell phone messages, social media, or drive-bys where they just yelled at each other from their cars. There was always a safe distance, a few feet of bar between the two of them, but after months of threatening and harassing and what some people would call mutual stalking, on April 14th, 2009, in Pinellas Park, Florida, the figurative pot boiled over. And at the end of this confrontation, Rachel Wade was going to jail and she was up for life in prison, and Sarah Ludemann lay bleeding to death in the street just blocks from her home. Now, who were Rachel Wade and Sarah Ludemann? Let's start with Sarah. Sarah Rose Ludemann was the only child of Charles, who was a cab driver, and his wife Gay, who was a surgical nurse. She was born on December 7th, 1990, and she was her parents' world. The two had always wanted kids, and they had been trying to conceive a long time before actually being able to have her, which breaks my heart when a couple has trouble conceiving, but that was a situation they were in. So when she was finally born, which I believe was like 16 years into their relationship, they were just overjoyed with finally having the baby that they had always wanted. So this family had initially lived in New York, and they had lived in New York as long as they could, as long as anyone could remember, right? And I say family, not couple, because Charles and Gay were a family prior to having a child. You can be a family and not have a kid. So I say family and not couple. But then once they did have their child, they decided that they wanted to move somewhere else so where they could raise said child. They wanted to move somewhere warm and somewhere safe. So they moved to Pinellas Park, Florida. That is where they chose. And they moved into this stucco lime-colored house with this big porch and a bunch of wind chimes, a little home. Growing up, Sarah was really close with her parents, particularly her father. She was said to be a bit of a daddy's girl, and they spent a lot of time together. They were just like little buddies. They would take karate classes together, listen to the same music. She was said to be his little sidekick. She would go to work with him, because he drove a cab. She would go and ride around in the cab with him, and they would blast country music and sing along together and just be, just precious. I can't relate. Don't have a father, but I've heard it's great. As Sarah got older, she was growing up to be just like a really good young lady, the kind of kid any parent would ask for. She was really respectful of her parents' rules and their boundaries, and she was always coming home by her curfew. And she also did really good in school. She had a clear idea of what she wanted out of life, which was to be a veterinarian. She did not just want to do that. She actually put in the work to make those dreams a reality for her, even enrolling in a particular high school that had a veterinary medicine program so that she could start working towards this goal. And listen, just so you can understand just how dedicated this girl was, this school wasn't close to her, right? This isn't the school that she would have automatically been enrolled in due to proximity. She had to take an hour-long bus ride every day to and from school in order to go to this school, but she did it. She put in the work. This is what she wanted. So she made the extra effort, got up early to go to this school, and while there, she got straight A's. So she was just killing it. On top of being a good daughter, she was also a well-liked friend. She was a beautiful, tall, popular girl, but she was a bit on the shy and timid side, particularly where boys were involved. Like, she had her celebrity crushes. I assume Jonathan Taylor Thomas, JTT, because she was born at about the same time I was, and that was the one, you know, that and Devon Sawa. I had a fun fact about Devon Sawa, but I'm not going to give it. But anyway, she had those crushes on celebrities. She had crushes on cute boys at school, but she had never actually had a boyfriend. So in that arena of her life, she was a little less confident, a little less mature than she was in every other area of her life, where she seemed to be like taking it by the horns, the bull by the horns, just going. With boys, she was a little more timid, a little more shy, and a little more reserved. Now let's talk about Rachel, a girl who was similar to her in a lot of ways. Like, after all of this went down, it came out just how similar they were, like in so many ways, but they were also very different in some very fundamental ways. So, like Sarah, Rachel grew up in a family that loved her. She had 2 loving parents and a brother. Her and her brother were born to her mother, Janet, who was an elementary school teacher, and their father, Barry, who was a truck driver. And Rachel was said as a kid to be happy and joyful. Happy and joyful are the same thing, probably. Yeah, sure. Playful, friendly. She loved Disney princesses and loved watching Disney, right? Little girl doing little girl things. So Rachel, she came from a stable, loving home. Her and her family lived in this little brown house that was coincidentally, not coincidentally either, because obviously they knew each other because we're in this story. She lived not far from Sarah's house is the point. It was described as just a bike ride away, but the two didn't know each other until their teen years. Now, speaking of teen years, this is when there was a change in Rachel noticed. This is when she started to turn into a different person, get more rebellious, start not listening to her parents, start hanging out with older boys. Speaking of older boys, once when she was only 15, she got caught in the backseat of a parked car with a boy. A man in a compromising position. This guy was 19 years old having the sex with a 15-year-old girl, and he actually ended up being charged with a felony sex crime for this. Now, that doesn't really matter to the story, except for to illustrate that Rachel was just doing things that her parents were not thrilled about, right? They did not like the things that she was doing. They didn't like the positions she was putting herself in and the people she was spending time with, right? They were trying to get her to listen to them, trying to get her to even stick to a curfew, because her curfew was 10 p.m., but she was literally staying out all night. She would just leave and be like, deuces, I'm not coming back. And her dad was like, please come in at a reasonable hour. Please do what I'm saying. I'm trying to do what's best for you. You shouldn't be out that late. Nothing good ever happens after midnight. Rachel's parents trying to set some healthy boundaries for their daughter really brought out some extreme anger in Rachel. In one instance, when her and her mom got into a fight over some sort of bullshit, no doubt, that teenage girls get into fights with their mother about, Rachel actually pulled a knife out. And her mom says that she didn't point it at her or anything, and it was nothing like that. She wasn't threatening her with it. She says that she actually took it and just ran and hid in the bathroom, and that her mom was actually afraid she was going to hurt herself with it. She didn't, though, thankfully, right? I mean, yeah, we don't want her hurting herself with a knife. I don't know what that was about, but she didn't hurt herself. But I will say that this pulling a knife in a confrontation is some scary foreshadowing for what we're going to get into today. Rachel's parents did get her into therapy for a time, and it did seem like it was effective, but it didn't end up lasting, because here's the thing. Rachel didn't want to do it. And the impression I get from all the things I read is that Rachel did not do things that Rachel did not want to do. It was very much Rachel's way or the highway. And Rachel decided that she just didn't want to follow her parents' rules, and instead of dealing with the confrontation, she just started to run away. In her sophomore year of high school, she ran away more than 10 times, and each time her parents would call the cops. She'd be found and returned, and her parents would beg her to stay, but eventually Rachel decided that it wasn't enough to just run away, and she actually straight up moved out. When she was just 16, she dropped out of school, moved into her own apartment, and got a job as a waitress at Applebee's to support herself. If memory serves me correctly, when she first moved out, she was actually living with a boyfriend, but that didn't end up working out. So she did, get her own place, get the job, do her own thing. And she was very proud of her accomplishment. She was very proud of being able to put her mind towards something and do it and be able to support herself and take care of herself and be an independent woman. And she even posted about this on her MySpace page because, of course, MySpace. And she just put that she was a, quote, independent chick. So now that she had this freedom, she could work, she could take care of herself, but she could also hang out with whatever boys she wanted, right? And this was something that she liked because Rachel liked boys. She liked attention from guys. She was the type of girl that guys liked. She had that look to her, right? And she had the personality to match. She was a big flirt. She was even named the biggest flirt in high school, which, excuse me, why is that a section in the yearbook for like children. I don't know. I think that's a little bit weird. I think like high school, side note, like voting for people for things in high school I think is weird and stupid, but that's neither here nor there. But she was named the biggest flirt, and she was known to flirt with all the boys, even the boys that had girlfriends. She was just a very attractive girl, a girl who was very interested in her looks. Okay, I learned this, and I have to tell you this. So she was so interested in her looks that once she was later arrested, there was like a thing that had to be discussed at trial and had to be determined. And this was whether or not Rachel could wear makeup to court, because she was very concerned with how she looked and she wanted to wear makeup to court. So this is something the judge actually had to rule on. And in case you're curious what they ruled, because I'm sure somebody will, because I was like, I have to learn all about this. It doesn't matter to the case, but it's something that I just had to know. The judge decided that yes, she could put makeup on for her trial, but it had to be brand new makeup that was opened in front of a bailiff. She had to put it on with no mirror and then had to get rid of it at the end of the day, and she had to waive her right to sue if she had an allergic reaction. Anyways, she was very well liked, very popular, especially with the boys. She was like that hot, bad girlfriend popular. You know what I mean? Oh, like, okay. She was a Courtney Shane type of popular, not a Liz Purr type of popular. I don't know how I can explain that any more clearly. So if you get it, you get it. And if you don't, I'm so sorry. Anyways, moving out was a good thing for her. It was a good position for her. It was a good thing for her life. It was also very good for her relationship with her family, because as I said, it was a bit rocky. Things were not so good. But when she moved out, when she had her own space, she and her parents had a much better relationship. They were much closer. And she actually opted, like she would choose to go home on the weekends and have dinner with her family. All right, now you know who the girls here are. Now you know who the players are. Sarah, shy, timid, living at home, still young and inexperienced in life and love, but working hard in school to go after what she wanted. And Rachel, more open, extroverted, experienced, living on her own and making her own way. Less innocent, down to party. Now, though they came from similar beginnings, at this point in their lives, they did seem to be drastically different girls who didn't have much in common. But they did have one thing that was very specific to them and very much in common. And this is that they were both absolutely in love with their boyfriend. Their shared boyfriend, who neither of them wanted to be sharing. And this was a man, a boy, a person, a guy, a human, named Josh Camacho. Now, Josh Camacho, I will say that his backstory isn't very important or interesting to me, so I'm not going to go super far into it, but I will give you a little bit of information. The reason I don't find him to be very interesting or worth talking about is because honestly, he seems like a dick. At this point in his life, he seemed like a bit of a dick. And like, if you meet one guy like this, you've met all the guys like this. Josh was said to not be the type of guy you'd want your daughter to date. He loved weed, took photos of himself flexing and smoking and holding guns. Josh lived with his parents. He barely held down a job. He was the type of guy who was a known player and proud to be one. A friend of his later said that they believe that Josh probably had more girlfriends than the 3 that we're going to discuss today. And so far, we've only discussed 2. There is one more girlfriend in play that we're going to discuss that doesn't come into play. Like, she's not that important to the story, but she did exist during the same time. But apparently he had even more girlfriends than just these 3. And this friend said of these relationships, and I quote, "They were all supporting him, buying him clothes, buying his shoes, paying his cell phone bill, and they all knew about each other." It's so gross to me, but like, I feel like we all know this type of guy. He was the type of guy who friends and he would joke about the fact that he was able to juggle all of these girls without any of them knowing. And the thing is they sort of did know. Here's the thing. He had a way with words. He had a way of convincing each of these girls that though he might have still been sleeping with somebody on the side, you, baby, are the only one that I want. And even though they knew deep down that could not be true, they wanted to believe him. He was that guy. And at the time that he's dating Rachel and he's dating Sarah, he has another girlfriend. This is a longtime girlfriend named Erin, who he actually met in elementary school. He or she, who was it? He wrote her a note saying, "Do you like me?" She wrote back, "Yes, I do." And they were together ever since elementary school. It sounds incredibly pure, except for that he's a dick, so you know it's not pure. So the 2 went on to date starting as far back as elementary school, and by the senior year of high school, by the time he was a senior in high school, they had a child together. And Erin had actually broken up with Josh while the 2 were while she was pregnant. Backtrack. So they had a kid together, right? But while she was pregnant, she actually broke up with him because she found out that he had been cheating on her all the time and she was tired of it. One of the people he was cheating with at this time was Sarah, by the way. So this is where it's all overlapping on each other and it's really messy and it's really gross. She broke up with him, but it seemed like they were kind of on again, off again, where she'd get tired of his bullshit, she'd break up with him, he'd apologize, he'd come groveling, she'd come crawling back, and the whole cycle would repeat itself again and again. And I mean, it is hard to break that cycle, especially when you have a child together, because you have that bond, you have that closeness, and you care about each other. And she obviously cared about him. It was clear that she did, but it was completely unearned because he wasn't good to her. He referred to her as his baby's mama, but he didn't treat her with respect, and he wasn't good to her, and he wasn't good to their kid. Like, he didn't help with their son at all. He didn't contribute anything financially to help support the son. But despite this, she was the bigger person and didn't, try to get full custody or anything like that. Even though he wasn't putting in his weight to help with the baby, she would let him see his son whenever he wanted and would never say anything bad about him because it's not her place to do so. It's, up to the child to grow up and be able to see things clearly from that point of view. But that was sort of the relationship dynamic that's going on there. So this is the type of guy that this is the guy that this is all about. Remember that throughout the story. This loser. I'm sorry. No, I'm not. This loser. Now, it seems like Rachel had been with Josh first and longest between her and Sarah. Erin was like the long-term girlfriend. Then came Rachel, then came Sarah. So Rachel was with him before Sarah. And they had actually met in elementary school. They didn't date in elementary school, which elementary schoolers probably shouldn't be dating regardless. But they met. They separated, they went on with their lives, and then they reconnected later. They reconnected at about the same time that Rachel got her own place. So they'd start to date. He'd stay over at house because he knew that he could do so, and he could do so for free, get whatever he could from these women. That was the type of guy that he was. So he'd date Rachel. He'd go to her house at night. He'd sleep with her. He'd then leave, and he'd cheat with Erin and do this and do that. And it was super dysfunctional from the beginning. And it was said that they broke up a lot. They were on again, off again, on again, off again. It seemed like the type of relationship that you never really knew when you were together and when you weren't. And then he met Sarah. And this is when Erin was pregnant with their child. So Sarah, a late bloomer when it came to love and inexperienced when it came to the whole relationship aspect physically, right? None of that. She hadn't done any of that. Well, she is at Chick-fil-A with a friend of hers, and this is where Josh is working. Josh comes out. He sees her. She sees him. They lock eyes. He winks at her. He makes her feel pretty. And that's it. She's so into him. Her best friend later told the judge of Sarah's love for Josh. Yeah, that sounds good. And I quote, "Josh was her first boyfriend, her first everything. Sarah loved him completely, even until the end. He became her world. He broke her heart." So Sarah and Josh are dating, and they're dating about a year, and the relationship isn't going great. Sarah is totally in love with him, but big surprise to all of us, he doesn't treat her very well. He starts to get controlling. He starts telling her who she can see and what she can wear. He even tells her that he doesn't want her to wear dresses and skirts because he doesn't want other guys to look at her legs. So she starts wearing pants. And you can just tell that this relationship and this guy is wearing her down. She started to change a lot. The once motivated and determined girl only really cared about Josh. She did what he wanted, started adopting his behavior and personality. She started drinking, smoking weed, staying out late. She even dropped 30 pounds in the time they were together and even switched schools. She left the school with the veterinary program where she had been basing her entire life around so that she could go to the school that Josh went to so that they could be together more. Now, her parents did not like Josh at all. They met him once and they were like, absolutely fucking not. But you can't do that, because you're going to push your child away. So even though her parents didn't like him, even though her father referred to him as the rat, they did all they could to try to have a relationship with them for their daughter's sakes. Sake. Her dad, Charlie. Yeah. Charles/Charlie would try to do things with him, go out on man trips, doing manly things, manning, if you will. And Sarah's mom would do everything she could to make him feel welcome in their home, which was hard for them because they could tell that he was no good for her and that she was changing and she was becoming a different person, and it wasn't for the better. It was definitely for the worse, but that at this time in her life, Josh was all she cared about. It was just hard for her parents to watch because they could see how toxic the relationship was. And then it got even more toxic, as if it could get more toxic. Sarah had known. Sarah had known that Erin existed and knew that he had a child and knew that he generally wasn't super faithful, and that it was a little bit of a gray area. But by the mid to end of 2008, she found out like full on that he was not faithful at all, that he had been cheating the whole time, and that Rachel existed. Prior to that, he'd been able to hide it, relatively well. He was pretty good at juggling women. I think part of what made it easy to juggle these girls in particular is that they had opposing schedules. Like Sarah had her curfew. So what he would do is he would hang out with Sarah until her curfew ran out. She'd have to go home, and then he'd be like, okay, now I'm going to go to Rachel's. And he'd go to Rachel's house and he'd be with her all night, and then somehow also have time to throw Aaron in the mix. It's just wild. I don't know how anyone has the time, energy, strength, the will. Like who? I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm a bitter old hag of a person, but I wouldn't even want to date 3 people at one time. Like I've told my husband a million times, if anything ever happens to him and I'm done with the romance part of my life, right? So to be opting in, choosing to have multiple relationships at one time, it just seems like exhausting and unnecessary and not even something one should covet, but yet here we find ourselves. Now, Sarah finding out about Rachel definitely caused more issues in their relationship. It made things way more rocky than they already had been. This is when they'd start to fight. She'd bring it up. The two would fight. He'd break up with her. She'd be devastated. He'd be super cold to her. And then he'd show her like a little, just like the tiniest fucking bit of respect or adoration, which was fake. And then she'd come crawling back to him. But then as soon as they were back together, the fights would continue. It got so bad that the cops started getting calls, okay? Whether it just be from fights between Sarah and Josh themselves, or fights even on some occasions between Sarah and Aaron. Like on at least one occasion, I think 2 occasions, they got into fights. They got into a fight or 2 fights where the cops had to be called on them. Like it was just very, very messy. But the worst of it, and what brings us into our story today, were the fights between Sarah and Rachel. It's so sad because both girls were convinced that they were the ones for Josh, even though they knew that he was stepping out and he wasn't being faithful and he was sleeping with other people. They were both completely convinced that deep down in his heart, he loved each of them only. That yes, he did these things, but really who he wanted, who he needed to be with was me. That's how both of them felt. And because they were convinced of this, they were brutal to each other. Rachel was a dick to Sarah. Right? She would send her text messages bragging about the fact that she was with Josh. She would call her and threaten her, and she would post things on MySpace just to instigate a fight between her and Sarah, posting things like, "Lovin' my boo," which, barf. Rachel would call Sarah fat and ugly and say she didn't understand why Josh would ever want her, saying that, like, Sarah still had her parents' curfew and Rachel had her own place, and Josh could get literally anything he wanted from Rachel. She got so intense that one time she called Sarah like 20 times in the span of 2 hours. And during some of these calls throughout the months, she would leave some pretty intense voicemails, which is something that is going to come up later. Now, it must be said that Sarah wasn't passive in these fights. The two definitely harassed each other. It wasn't like a one-sided thing. I don't think it does anything good for the case to pretend like that wasn't the situation. And I don't think by saying that Sarah was also mean to Rachel, it somehow lessens the severity of the fact that Sarah is the one who was killed here. It was said that Sarah knew about Rachel and Josh, but instead of taking her frustration out on Josh, which is really the only person who the frustration should have been directed at, same from Rachel's side. Both of these girls should have been pissed at Josh, not at each other, but regardless of that, they were directing their anger in the worst possible way, which I've told you guys about this before. I think that it's very foolish for people who are in situations where their partners are unfaithful to be mad at the other woman or other man instead of being mad at their partner, who is the person who has actually made the promise to be faithful to you. They're the ones who owe you something, not the stranger. But regardless. So Sarah would show up at Rachel's work. Sarah and her friends would get a table in Rachel's section at Applebee's, and they would try to make her life hell. They make comments at her, they try to bump her, they try to get her to drop trays, shit like that. In another occasion, Sarah followed Rachel to a Taco Bell, and she bumped into her car and then shot her with silly string. She, like Rachel, would post things on social media to try to instigate a fight between the two of them. They were both just going at each other, man. And she even posted, she responded to a comment, or I can't remember how MySpace works. She commented on something Rachel posted and essentially put that Josh had found better in her. So she was basically saying, yeah, you had him, but now he's found better. It was just very childlike stuff on both sides, which, they were, kind of children. They're kind of adults. They're kind of children. I guess it's, kids do seem to be older now, right? Adults seem to be younger and kids seem to be older. It seems like you're a child for longer That wasn't as much of the case then, but either way, it was just childlike shit, which I've seen 1,000 times. It just doesn't always end up in a story like this. So now we're going to talk about that night, the night that childlike bullshit turned into actual murder. Now, this was on the evening of April 14th, 2009, and on this day, both girls thought that they had plans. Well, both girls did have plans with Josh. They were both anticipating seeing him that evening. It's really sad too, because this is the last day of Sarah's life, right? And she was really upset. She was just like having a bad day. Rachel had posted something online that had been about Josh. Sarah had seen it and she was really upset about it. So she started texting Josh. She sent him several texts and he just ignored her the entire time. He ignored her. She texted him about how much she loved him, how much she cared about him, how she just wanted things to work out. And he said nothing to her. Right? For hours, he said nothing to her. She started texting him at 1 p.m. And finally, hours later, he did text her back and he said 3 little words to her. No, not I love you. I know it seemed like it might go there. It wasn't. He simply said, bring the movies. And she did just that. As soon as he said it, she jumped up, she got the movies, she got in her car and she drove over to his sister's house where he was waiting. And then the two spent that evening hanging out. They watched movies. I think they drank and smoked a little bit. They played Wii and they just spent time together. Now, this left Rachel waiting because she was also expecting him to come over. Now, I don't know if Rachel knew where he was, if his sister's house was a place he frequented, or if someone told her where to find him, but she did find out where he was. And she drove over to Josh's sister's house. And this is when she saw Sarah's car parked out front. So in response to seeing Sarah's car out front, Rachel, then texts Josh. And she's like, all right, now I see why you're not talking to me. Now I see why you're ignoring me and why you're not here. It's because you're with her. And he was super cold to her. And he's like, yup, I don't like you anymore. What are you even doing here? You need to go. And she was like, no, I'm going to wait for her to go so that you and I can talk. It was just like, just go home. Like he said he doesn't like you anymore. Just go home. But she doesn't. And at about the same time, Sarah's curfew had come and gone, and she was late. She was not home yet because remember what I said? She started disobeying her parents and staying out past curfew when she started getting with Josh because she changed. So she texts her dad back. No, I missed that part. Her dad texted her and was like, when are you coming home, bro? And she just wrote back, soon. But she didn't want to leave at that moment because she didn't want to go out and deal with the whole Rachel situation. So she was waiting at Josh's sister's house until Rachel left. All right, so after a while, Rachel does leave. And once Sarah realizes that Rachel's gone, she goes to leave to go home. But before she leaves, Josh's sister Janet and their friend, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, Helica. That might be very fucking wrong, but that's what I'm going to go with. They're like, hey, would you mind giving us a ride to McDonald's? And she's like, no problem, dude, let's go. So the 3 girls get in the car and they drive off. Now, there's a little bit of a gray area for me on the timeline here, but it seems that on the way, they pass by Rachel's house and they yell, and Rachel was outside walking her dog, and they like yell from the car, like, stay away from my man, and then just drive by. You know, kids, they've been dumb. They've been doing this to each other. Whatever. Rachel says that for whatever reason, this time, this drive-by scared her. She was home alone at the time. So she goes back inside the house and she calls an ex-boyfriend of hers named Javier. And she's like, hey, can I please come to your house? I'm freaked out. I don't want to be alone. He's like, sure, no problem. So she gets ready to go. She grabs her stuff. She grabs her purse. She goes into her kitchen, she opens a drawer, she pulls out a steak knife, and she takes that knife with her to Javier's. So now, Sarah and the other 2 girls, they're driving to McDonald's. And on the way, they run into another friend. Apparently kids are just all over the goddamn place in this town. Maybe it's a small town. I didn't look it up. Didn't matter to the story to me. So they're driving. They see a friend at a stop sign. They stop. They start chatting. And this friend's like, guess who I just saw down the street at some other person's house? This girl. You know the girl. Rachel. She's over there. Turns out the house she was talking about, it was Javier's house. So now, Rachel and her 2 friends decide, let's change gears. Let's go over, let's confront Rachel. Not a good choice, considering where this ends up. I wish none of this happened, is basically what I'm saying. Not that she made a bad choice or anything's her fault. I'm just saying I wish this didn't happen, because it seems like a series of unfortunate events that led to her not being alive, and it fucking sucks, because it's stupid as hell. So, they start driving that way. While they're on their way to confront her, Sarah's phone rings, and it is Rachel. And I'm sure this phone call just lit the fire that was already in them. You know, they're already in go mode, and now this call comes in, and she's like yelling. Sarah puts it on speakerphone, and all the girls in the car report hearing Rachel say, quote, I'm gonna stab you and your Mexican boyfriend. But she wasn't even Mexican, ma'am. You were dating him. You should know that, but sure. Now, once the girls arrive at Javier's house, things move very, very fast. So Sarah and her friends pull up in the van. Well, they're driving up in the van. Rachel, Javier, and another guy, it's a friend named Dustin, are standing out front. Apparently, Sarah comes up real fast and hits the brakes real hard, stopping pretty close to where we're standing. Now, there are differing accounts on what happened next. Rachel says that all three girls got out of the car and ran at her and started to attack her, and that she fought back in self-defense. But others who were present and saw the fight said that that's not what happened. That Rachel ran at the van and caught Sarah at the driver's side door before she was even able to get out of the van. But the one thing that was consistent is that Rachel had a knife in her hand. The next thing anyone knew, Sarah had been stabbed. Not once, but twice. She had been stabbed once in the shoulder and once in the chest, and it hit her heart. She stopped, she grabbed her chest, she stumbled back, and she went towards her van, and she said to her friend simply, "We gotta go." But she never made it back into the van. She pulled out her cell phone, and with her last dying breaths, she called Josh. He answered the phone, and she just simply said to him, "It hurts," before collapsing in the street. Now at this point, Sarah's friend Hilika pulled Sarah into her lap and was holding her, trying to stop the bleeding while dialing 911. And as she's doing this, she looks up at Rachel and she's like, you fucking stabbed her. And she said that Rachel just looked at her and smirked. Apparently after the stabbing, Rachel simply said, "I'm done," before walking over, throwing the knife into a neighboring yard, and then just sitting down and waiting for the police to come. Meanwhile, Josh has gotten this call from Sarah, is freaking out. So he actually goes and he runs to Sarah's family's house because, again, everyone lived really close here, and he just felt like something was really wrong and her parents needed to know. Now, I feel like somebody else, I didn't see this, but I feel like somebody else must have called him and given him more information, because I don't know why "it hurts" would automatically lead him to frantically run to her parents' house and for him to know where they were, because they did. He runs, he goes and tells Sarah's parents what happened. Josh and Sarah's dad go to Javier's house, so they knew where to go. And her father said that when they got there, the ambulances were already there, and he just knew in his heart that his daughter was gone, which is so sad. And she was, like, they tried to save her. She was taken to the hospital and they did all they could, but she wasn't able to be saved. And she was pronounced dead at about 2 a.m. because the knife had literally punctured her heart. Before her father did go to the hospital, before leaving the scene, he did see Rachel and he started to scream at her, as I'm sure you can imagine. Like, what would you be thinking? You know, this person just hurt your child. And it was said that she was just sitting there emotionless, smoking a cigarette while Sarah's father was yelling at her. So now Rachel was taken to the police station for questioning and all that jazz. And at the time, she had no idea that Sarah had died, because when Sarah was taken away to go to the hospital, she was still alive and she was pronounced dead at the hospital. So while Rachel's being questioned, she's just super chill, super calm, cool and collected, telling police her version of the story, which differed from other people who were present at the scene. She told police that she was scared of Sarah, that she had been afraid when Sarah had drove by previously and told her to stay away from Josh, and that's why she had grabbed the knife, that she had taken it with her for protection as she went to Javier's. She also said that she was afraid that Josh would hurt her. She said that Josh had hurt her in the past. I don't know if this is true. She says it happened. He denies it. She says that he threatened her with a gun before and said that if he ever left her, he would shoot her. And he denies this again. But she said because of this, she was also afraid of Josh because she knew that he had a gun on him and she didn't know what he would do either. Now, it was while being at the police station and being questioned that Rachel actually learned that Sarah died, because I am assuming that she must have thought that they were going to be able to save her, because she seemed genuinely surprised when she learned that she was dead. She started to cry and she was like, "I just wanted her to stop. I just wanted her to leave me alone." And the cop was like, "Listen," like, he was really cold about it. He's like, "Listen, she's definitely going to leave you alone now because she's dead. You killed her." Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, Rachel was arrested. She was charged with second-degree murder, and she was held on a $500,000 bond that no one was able to make. So she stayed in jail the whole time as she waited for her trial. The trial was very publicized. The courthouse parking lot was filled with local reporters, and the trial was recorded so people could actually watch the whole thing. Because it was so popular, the judge did ask Rachel if she wanted to change a venue, and she declined. It seemed to me that the judge may have even thought that a change of venue would have been a good idea for her, because the judge was even like, "Listen," to my neighbor, apparently. The judge was like, "Are you sure you don't want to change?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm sure." Now, Rachel was claiming that the stabbing was done in self-defense, so that was going to be the route that her attorney took. They were also going to be talking about the stand your ground law in Florida, which basically means that a person can stand their ground, right? They don't have to retreat in the face of danger. They can meet force with force. And that is a defense for murder. So I definitely understand why her attorney was going to take that approach, though it was going to be like a hard, long road ahead for them. And I'm also saying I'm not agreeing that that's what happened. I'm saying I understand why they went with this method, because like, what the fuck else are they going to do? So through her defense, Rachel said, like, listen, I didn't mean to stab Sarah. I didn't want to stab Sarah. That wasn't what I was planning to do. I only had that knife with me because I was scared. I was scared of Sarah, and I was scared of Josh because Josh has before threatened to kill me, and he even threatened again to kill me that very night, which he was questioned about this. So she said that after she had stabbed Sarah, that when Josh came on the scene, he threatened to kill her. And Josh was questioned about this and questioned about his previous threats. And he's like, listen, I never threatened her previously. I don't know where this bitch is getting this information. I did, however, threaten to kill her that night because she had literally just stabbed my girlfriend and I was pissed. Rachel then went on to tell the court to prove that she wasn't like trying to hurt her or wanting this to happen, that she had removed herself from the situation that night, that she had left her home and went to another person's home because she did not want to fight. She didn't want the confrontation. She didn't want anything to happen. And she said they tracked her down and they brought the fight to her. And the only reason she grabbed the knife prior to the fight beginning is because she thought that if they saw the knife, they would stop. She said she thought if they saw the knife, they wouldn't hurt her, that they would get scared, or they would know that she was scared and they would stop. In her version of the story from that night, she says that she was standing outside of Javier's when Sarah and her friends pulled up so quickly that they almost hit her with the van, and then they jumped out and started attacking her. She said she had the knife, but that at first she didn't even fight back. She just took there, and she just stood there, and she didn't even start swinging until she'd been hit at least 3 times. And then she just started flailing her arms with reckless abandon, not trying to hit somebody, but somehow managed to hit Sarah twice in the chest area. She said at first she didn't even realize she had stabbed somebody, that all of a sudden she looked down and she saw blood and she's like, oh my God, what happened? And she said that once she did realize that Sarah had been stabbed, she didn't realize how bad it was or like where she had been stabbed. Now there was one person who backed up Rachel's side of the story, and that was that guy Dustin, the friend who was at Javier's house. Dustin was actually overseas by the time the trial took place and he appeared by video call, but he did say that he saw all 3 girls get out of the van and run at Rachel, and not Rachel approach the van. But he was the only person other than Rachel who said it went down that day. All the other witnesses, several other witnesses, I think Janet, Helica, and Javier, as far as I know, 3 J's, didn't realize that. Janet, Helica, and Javier all said that Rachel approached the van. Basically, the prosecution said that what happened that night was that Sarah and her friends got in the van, and at the time Sarah was really upset, that she was really heated and she was really shaky, probably from, Rachel coming over to Josh's sister's house while she was there, and it just made her very upset. That her and her friends were driving along when they ran into their other friend, her name was Ashley, by the way, who was, standing there at the corner, who told them where Rachel was. And Ashley, by the way, feels so bad. I read some of her testimony. She just feels awful. She feels like people hate her and think it's her fault that Sarah's not here. I feel bad for her because she does take, she feels that guilt and that responsibility for her being part of the reason Sarah was even there. But anyway, so the girls are driving, and this is when, Rachel calls Sarah's phone and says, I'm going to stab you and your Mexican boyfriend, right before then going on to stab Sarah. So it doesn't look good. The girls then get to Javier's house. They do pull in. They admit that they pulled in pretty fast and that they almost hit Rachel's car, but this is where the stories take a departure. They say that Sarah did try to get out of the van, but Rachel ran at the van and met her at the door before she even had a chance to get out. They said that the girls started to fight at the van. Rachel stabbed Sarah twice in the chest before saying, I'm done, and walking to discard the knife in a neighbor's yard. The prosecution was saying that Rachel had intentionally stabbed Sarah, and they hammered this in by saying, listen, even in her own version of the story, all of these girls are attacking her, but somehow only Sarah is stabbed. Sarah is stabbed twice in the torso, and stabbed with such force that it goes through her skin, through her muscle, through her bone, stabbing her in the heart. And she was stabbed with such force that the knife blade bent, and only Sarah was stabbed. They hammer in that it was Sarah that Rachel wanted to stab, and they illustrated this further by showing that, okay, so after Rachel stabbed Sarah, while Sarah's there, bleeding to death, really, fighting for her life, Janet, Josh's sister, then takes Rachel and beats the living shit out of her, probably, because she just stabbed her friend. Listen, I'm not a fighter at all. It's not who I am, but I get it. If somebody stabbed my best friend in front of me, I might have to take him to the gun show, right? Like, I get it. But the prosecution was like, listen, so you're saying that you stabbed Sarah in self-defense because she was beating you. But as Janet beat you, and she beat you good, you didn't stab her. You scratched her, you punched her, you kicked, you scrapped. But what did you do with the knife? Nothing. The prosecution was just like, listen, yeah, you used the knife for self-defense, but you only stabbed Sarah. The prosecution was then like, listen, why'd you throw the knife in a yard? If it was self-defense, then why did you try to get rid of the knife? Why did you try to hide the evidence? It's because you knew it wasn't self-defense. You stabbed her, then you tried to get rid of the evidence that you stabbed her. Then when the cops arrived, you calmly sat there and asked one of them for a cigarette, which is what she did. So that was powerful. Then the 911 call being played, that was also powerful. They played the 911 call, and you see in court Sarah's parents like hugging each other and crying as they listen to their daughter's friends frantically scrambling, trying to keep Sarah alive. That was powerful, especially when combined with testimony from the police officer who was on the scene. And this officer was asked, like, was Sarah upset? Was she worried? Did she show any emotion while you guys were there and all this was going on? And the cop said no. But what was most powerful for the prosecution and the most damning for the defense was those voicemails. Remember the voicemails that Rachel had left Sarah? The jury got to hear those as well. Now, Rachel did say that Sarah had left her similar voicemails, but they had since been deleted, and that may be true. But there was something to actually hearing those voicemails that made the difference. Like, you could not unhear what Rachel was saying. She threatened Sarah often, saying that she was going to fuck her up or fuck something that belonged to her up. She said to Sarah that, Josh may have played me, but I'm going to play you, so you better watch out. And the worst one, though, the worst was left on Sarah's voicemail 7 months prior to the murder, which was a long time, right? But to hear those words while sitting there during a murder trial was so powerful. Rachel said to Sarah on this voicemail, and I quote, "Seriously, I told you to watch your fucking back and not to fucking chill with him. I'm guaranteeing you that I'm gonna fucking murder you. I'm letting you know that now. You're a fucking fat bitch. I'm going to fucking kill you." The prosecution was like, I'm gonna fucking murder you. You said that 7 months before stabbing her in the heart. Then the prosecution was like, I'm gonna stab you and your Mexican boyfriend. You did this just moments before stabbing her and killing her. And then the prosecution said, and I quote, "She promised her. She did it. And we're here today because Sarah is dead as a result." After all was said and done, Rachel's attorney did say that those voicemails were their biggest obstacle. Like, he did what he could, and he tried to question Rachel on the stand and tried to get her to explain them and got her to say that there were voicemails from Sarah and da-da-da-da. But hearing them just really was just, like, that was it. The jury didn't hear the voicemails that Sarah left, but they did hear Rachel's. And her attorney does believe that if they had been able to hear Sarah's as well, that might have made the difference, but we'll never know for sure. During closing arguments, the defense did again try to say that it was Sarah who was the aggressor, that she had went to Rachel, and if they had never shown up and tried to fight Rachel, none of this would ever happen. And the prosecution was like, maybe that's true. We don't really know. One thing we know for sure is that if Rachel didn't have the knife, then Sarah would definitely be alive. So the jury was given 3 choices that they could make. They could find her guilty of second-degree murder, they could find her guilty of manslaughter, or they could find her innocent. So they went in, they did their deliberations, they came out and let them know that they had a verdict. And the energy in the courtroom was so intense that the judge said, and I quote, "We need to show the maturity and lack of trauma that was evidently lacking by all the people involved in this case." In the end, it took less than 3 hours for the jury of 6 people, which I did not know that Florida only had 6 jurors, but that's something that I now know, and now you now know. It took the jury of 6 people less than 3 hours to find Rachel Wade guilty of second-degree murder. When Rachel learned her fate and learned that she was guilty, she just sobbed, and you saw Sarah's father turn to his wife in the courtroom, take a deep breath, and simply nod. After the verdict was read, Sarah's parents didn't really have much to say to anyone at all. Her father simply said that this was a tragedy on both sides, which is, a big thing for him to say. And Rachel's defense attorney said the same thing. Like, you couldn't sit on either side of this courtroom and not feel the immense loss and sorrow that everyone was feeling on that day. So she was found guilty, and the only question now was how much time was she going to serve? So now we will move on to the sentencing hearing. Both parents wore black to the sentencing hearing because both parents were effectively losing their daughters, which is really sad. I guess the parents didn't have any animosity towards each other, which is like a big thing, and you don't always see that, but they didn't. They realized that they were both losing something in this, and they expressed, sorrow for each other, and they were so sorry for each other's loss, but they couldn't even bring themselves to look at each other, which is really sad. Sarah's parents stood towards the front of the room, and Rachel's parents sat in the back, and during this sentencing hearing, Sarah's mom ended up taking these 2 giant framed photos of Sarah and putting them on the little podium and faced them towards the judge and was like, "Remember, this is my daughter. She lives in a cemetery. That's where I go visit her." Sarah's father, Charlie, said of losing his daughter, and I quote, "I'll never get to hold my daughter again, never get to see her get married, never hear her laugh at my dumb jokes. The only way I can hear her voice is when I call her cell, and she says, 'Hey, this is Sarah. Leave me a message, and I'll call you back.'" Rachel's parents talked about what a tragedy the murder was, that these girls thought they were so different, but they were more alike than either of them knew, and that they had both now lost their futures completely. And Rachel's father, Barry, said of this, and I quote, "2 beautiful young girls both made the same decision to get involved with someone who not only didn't love them, but used them and demean them." And that's sad, but that's the truth. That is the sad truth of this case. This guy did not care about them, and it was illustrated at the trial that he didn't care about them. They literally did everything. They bent over backwards. They fought for him. Rachel killed for him, but he, when put on the stand, was pretty passive about how he felt about them, said he wasn't in relationships with either of them, and referred to both of them as friends with benefits. He's like, "I don't know what they thought, but this is what they were to me." And speaking of Josh, I didn't even mention this before, but Josh was forbidden from going to Sarah's funeral, which makes sense. I mean, all of this did revolve around him, and I'm sure her family had another reason not to want him there, and that's because the day that she died, so she was taken off to the hospital, right, to try to save her life. Well, Josh and Sarah's dad also went to the hospital, and when they got there, Charlie tried to convince Josh to go in there, was like, "Go in there and be with her. She loves you. Go be with her." And he refused to go in there. He's like, "This is literally all because of you." And still he refused to go in there. Her dad went in there, right? And when he came out, when all was said and done and she had died, Josh had already left. He was just gone. He just sucks. That's my point. And Rachel's attorney agrees. Rachel's attorney was like, "Listen, maybe he's not legally responsible for what happened here, but he is ethically and morally culpable." The defense asked the judge to give Rachel 15 years in prison plus 15 years probation, and the prosecution was asking for life. Rachel said to her that the sentencing was sort of irrelevant, whether it be 5 years or 20 years. She was still going to have to live with this for the rest of her life, and she was going to think about it day in and day out, whether she was at home or in jail. For what it was worth, though, she did apologize to Sarah's family, saying that she was so sorry it happened, and that some days she wishes that it could have been her instead. Now, even though the judge had the discretion to consider Rachel a youthful offender and give her a lighter sentence, he could have even given her just time served. Ultimately, Rachel Wade was sentenced to 27 years in prison, and the judge said that they believed that this was deliberate, that Rachel meant to kill Sarah, and that this was no accident. After the sentencing hearing, Rachel's father had to help Rachel's mother out of the courtroom because she was just, as I'm sure you can imagine, they didn't speak to the media. Sarah's parents didn't really speak to the media either. Her father simply said, he wasn't happy, but what else were they going to do? There's nothing that can be done. And then they went to the cemetery to tell their daughter the news. Now, there are many people who believe that Rachel should not have gotten the sentence that she did, that it was too harsh, etc., etc. There's even a Facebook page for her that I found, which is basically an entire Facebook page dedicated to Rachel Wade and the fact that she shouldn't be in jail. She shouldn't have gotten the sentence that she did, that she acted in self-defense. And I just think that that's really interesting. It's such a divisive case. I'm very curious as to what you guys think about that down below, because I can see how there are split feelings where, generally speaking, it's pretty black and white for me generally speaking, it's pretty black and white. And in this case, I do see the gray area. So I'm curious as to what you guys think as well. This case has become a sort of cautionary tale for people, warning people not to say things that they normally wouldn't say while hiding behind a screen, because it's very easy for people to go back and forth saying things they would never say if they were face to face, which takes a situation and blows it up bigger than it would, because people are saying harsher things than they ever would and getting more angry than they ever would. Rachel's attorney said that a situation like this can become explosive when you don't have to take accountability because there is no face-to-face interaction, and said that parents need to pay close attention to their children and pay attention to who and how they're talking on the internet. And Rachel seems to agree because ever since being in prison, she started working with teenagers to teach them the dangers of cyberbullying and was helping to write programs to give out at high schools. Now, Sarah's parents did end up filing a wrongful death suit against Rachel, and they were trying to get burial costs, medical bills covered, and pain and suffering. And basically, Sarah's dad was like, listen, this isn't even about the money. I didn't even pay for these things. Like the state paid for the burial and I think the funeral as well. He's like, I'm not even going to get this money. It's not about that. The money's going to somebody else. I just don't want Rachel to be able to profit off my daughter's death. Basically, he said he was tired of seeing Rachel's face all over the television set. Like, I guess she was doing a lot of appearances and getting a lot of interviews, and he didn't know if she was getting paid for those interviews. He knew that he had been offered money for an interview, and so he was worried that Rachel was, and that he just wanted to make sure that didn't happen. He didn't want to keep seeing her. He didn't want her to profit off of it at all. And he had heard that a book was going to be written as well, and he just didn't want her to make a dime. He said of this lawsuit, and I quote, "My wife is just tired of her getting all this attention, of everyone looking at her in prison and going, poor little girl." He added, quote, "She's gonna get out of prison while she's still in her 40s. She'll get to have a life. No lawsuit, no amount of money will bring back my only child." Now, I didn't see if this lawsuit was successful. I did see that her attorney, Rachel's attorney, responded and said that Rachel hadn't made any money, that no money was given to her for any of her appearances or anything like that, and that Rachel wasn't really focusing on that. He didn't even know if she was going to respond to the complaint because she was just working on her appeal. Now, as far as her appeal goes, Rachel did try to appeal, but it was denied. So where the case stands is that she is still in jail, and she is up for release in 2033. And that's it. That, my friends, is the story of the murder of 18-year-old Sarah Ludemann. And now that I've given you all the information, now that you've taken it all in and digested, and I know it was a lot, I feel like this is kind of a long one. I guess I'll find out in editing. But I want to know how you feel. I want you to revisit the question of the day, and that is this. Do you believe that Rachel's sentencing for the murder of Sarah Ludemann was justice, or do you believe that Rachel should have gotten off on self-defense? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. With that question, that's it. That's the end of this video. I hope you found this to be interesting and informative, and I hope it gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for remembering Sarah with me today. Before you leave, please don't forget to leave me any cases you would like to see me cover down below in the comment section of this video or any video you watch of mine. That's how I get my suggestions. I like looking into the cases you suggest, obviously. This case shows that. Michael. If you suggest a case, I'll put it on my list so I can get to it, and if I cover it, I'll give you a shout out because I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste, otherwise you would not be here. Of course, if you haven't already, don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my merch store where you can get sweet shirts like this, or mugs, or stickers, I think. There's some stuff. Beanies. I got some stuff. You wanted some stuff, so I made some stuff. And there's also a link to my membership where if you sign up for that, you get early access to videos, occasional live streams, polls, things like that. I want to say one more thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video, because without sponsors, I would not be able to do this full time and get you out as much content as I do. And of course, I want to thank you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.